What's happening, fandoms? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here,
we react to music videos and shows.
Today we're going back to New Rockstars, where Eric is gonna break it down for Ahsoka episode 6. We got to the other side of the hyper jump to the planet of Peridia, homeworld of witches of Dathomir, I think. And we don't understand what's going on there, but Eric's gonna tell us.
We'll see. Here
so
we go.
Let's go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Ahsoka Episode 6, Far, Far Away, a title that evokes the classic Star Wars blue text that was invoked by Jason Sindula last episode. The phrase Far, Far Away proving to be the answer to the question of where Thrawn went, as well as the answer to this question. Where are the turtles? So many cool questions and deeper bits of historical lore tying into this episode, so let's take it scene by scene for all the details you might have missed, and thanks to Missed Play for sponsoring this video. More about them in a moment. And again, we really appreciate you tuning into these Star Wars analyses. It's honestly an honor to stay up late writing these breakdowns every week. I just care a lot about this series, and I want to share all of that with you. So let's dive in.
Thank you, Eric.
Over that Lucasfilm opening, we hear this.
Yeah.
The closed captioning, distant Purgle call.
Yep.
But we don't begin this episode distant from the Purgle, we open with them inside of one. So this call being distant tells us that we are actually hearing this call from the perception of the three great mothers of Peridia, native Dathomiri, Night Sisters who harnessed these Purgle. This call is how they know the Jedi is coming. Hyperspace in this opening shot looks different than we've ever seen before in Star Wars.
We noticed that one.
It's a glowing blue tunnel surrounding the traveler. Now it's streaks of teal and pink and yellow and orange, all the colors in the visible spectrum, streaking past the whales, streaking between each other and under their fins. It's just such a cool way of showing that this form of hyperspace travel is beyond the kind that we've seen before, because we are traveling from galaxy to galaxy. Now, you may remember that moment in The Mandalorian Chapter 17 when Grogu and Din Djarin were traveling through hyperspace and Grogu saw a Purgle. And I
sure did.
Crazy, but in this shot, for a few frames on the right side of the screen, you do see a blur through hyperspace on the other side of this. That could be Din's N1 starfighter. I just went through it all frame by frame to see this. I think I honestly spent an hour staring at this shot, but now I can't unsee it. Now you may be asking, would the timeline match up? Ahsoka Tano doesn't appear in The Mandalorian Season 3, but Captain Carson Teva does appear on both seasons, and I suppose it's possible for his mission with Hera on Cetos happens before all that stuff he got into with The Mandalorian and Tim Meadows in The Mandalorian Season 3. But for all we know, the Purgle could be bending time with their form of hyperspace travel. I just want this to be true. Let me have it. Ahsoka tells Hu Yang that
I'm sure you have it
from the stories that he would tell them.
You have it.
Younglings back at the temple.
Ah, yes. History of the Galaxy, parts 1, 2, and 3.
1 being the best, of course.
I love this. It could be a meta nod to the Star Wars original trilogy, where I would definitely say the first is the best, but I can respect the opinion that The Empire Strikes Back might be better. Although we could also see parts 1, 2, and 3 as the 3 trilogies, the prequels, the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. And Ahsoka might be saying that the prequels are the best because that would be more of her era, but really she spans all the eras. Look, if you legit think that the prequels are better than the original trilogy, no shame. I just think Ahsoka would be more into a trilogy that ends with Anakin being redeemed rather than one that ends in tragedy for him, even if Dave Filoni identifies most with the prequel era. But that's just our meta understanding of this. What does this mean for the characters in the universe? George Lucas originally conceived his Star Wars narrative as the Journal of the Whills, with the Skywalker saga being an epic myth told by an advanced alien race called the Whills to inspire their youth, which is why every film would begin with the phrase "a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away," which again supplies this episode with its title and is a phrase
far away
by this Ahsoka series as we, for the first time, travel from one galaxy within the Star Wars universe to another. But what would the actual in-universe history of the galaxy be that Hu Yang would tell all these young Jedi? Currently, the accepted chronology begins with something called the Wellspring of Life, the birthplace of midichlorians. This gets explored in Clone Wars Season 6, Episodes 11 and 12. Episode 11 takes Yoda to Dagobah, where he hears Qui-Gon's voice explaining to him that all living things form the living force, and that feeds the more abstract cosmic force. And that cosmic force is contained in this wellspring. So in Episode 12, Destiny, Yoda heads to that wellspring and encounters inside of it this kind of planet geysering up all this midichlorian energy, and he encounters these 5 masked priestesses who each represent emotions and put Yoda through various trials. It's a really cool arc, and it's really where life began in this galaxy. Sometime after this, the gods of Mortis came to live in the ethereal realm of Mortis, and then eons after that, sometime around 25,000 BBY, the Dai Bendu, an order of priests who were precursors to the Jedi, established what became the Jedi Order on Ahch-To, led by the Prime Jedi, which was the figure depicted in that mosaic pool that Luke sat beside in The Last Jedi. And I feel like that last part of it, the Dai Bendu, would be the part 1 that Huyang would have told Ahsoka about the dawn of the Jedi Order. As the wellspring of life and Mortis were kind of surprises to Yoda and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan and Anakin, like while these mythological elements might have been buried somewhere in the Jedi archives, I don't think it's something that Huyang would have been programmed with and told us bedtime stories to all these young Jedi on the Crucible. Then again, in Rebel Season 4, Palpatine and his like archaeologist friend did kind of mention how the Jedi archives mentioned the gods of Mortis. I just don't know how much all the Jedi younglings would know about it. Still, they are important for us to know, and I will explain why later. Anyway, Ahsoka worries that Sabine went with Baylan willingly and that she didn't have enough time to train Sabine how to make the right choice, but Huyang says the Force provides insight but doesn't give all the answers.
Perhaps for Sabine, it was the only choice.
A choice she made for herself.
That is your fear.
Ah, fear. He's implying that fear is a path to the dark side. You know, it leads to anger, hate, suffering. He's saying, don't let fear corrupt your mind, Ahsoka. So Ahsoka takes the note and she forces the fear out of her mind. Getting back to some stories.
On second thought, tell me one of those stories.
A long time ago.
Love it.
Far, far away.
Far, far away.
And I love it because that is what Star Wars is for us. A way for us to escape our anxieties and just lose ourselves in some great stories. And this is actually the first time we hear this spoken aloud in Star Wars. But unlike the Wills in some other galaxy telling the story of Star Wars, Huyang must be talking about beings from another galaxy from his perspective who came to this galaxy and settled it. Those could be the celestial deities like the Mortis gods, but this episode also implies other races like the Dathomiri originate from other galaxies.
Yeah.
Let's move on. When the Eye of Sion exits hyperspace, it leaves a trail that crackles with electric bolts, which feels
So
like
cool.
a sickly violation of nature. Like they weren't meant to go on this journey. Like notice also that ring was smoldering orange when it first arrives and then cools down. Like it really feels like they pushed it to the limit. So they approach the planet Peridia, surrounded by a ring, which turns out is composed of Purgle bones. The Cetos star map depicted Peridia surrounded by a ring of Purgle, but I didn't know that meant a ring of dead Purgle. Morgan said Peridia is
the ancient homeworld of my ancestors, the Dathomiri.
So the Dathomiri, the people of the planet Dathomir, home to Maul's mother, Mother Talzin, were not originally native to that planet Dathomir. They settled that planet after migrating from another galaxy, and they just named it after their own race. This is a huge deal. Morgan says of the Purgle,
My people were among the first to harness and ride the creatures in the days before time was counted.
Jeez, between the Purgle and Danny Trejo telling us that the witches of Dathomir also used to ride the Rancors, these witches were just riding everything. Now in Star Wars Legends, the ancient Rakata were the first to use hyperspace technology, and based on that blue Kyber crystal celebrating the Rakatan uprising mentioned in Andor Episode 4, the Rakatans are Star Wars canon, but Morgan says that the Dathomiri were among the first, so there could have been like a few of them. But she says the days before time was counted, which would be old, predating recorded history, predating the Jedi Order, because when the Jedi started, they were counting years back then. Baylan says,
Peridia is a graveyard.
So it wasn't a fairy tale that he grew up hearing, it was more of a ghost story, a trek that Purgle make at the end of their lives, kind of like elephants migrating back to their known burial sites.
Like I
That's
said.
a real thing, folks. That elephant graveyard in The Lion King was based on a real ritual that these massive mammals do. It sounds like Purgle do a similar thing. Their dropship takes them past towering statues of Night Sister heads atop towering pillars, with their mouths contorted in this grotesque scream. I wonder if these could function as amplifiers for the Great Mother's voices that echo back to Morgan through time and space.
Oh,
The statues
maybe.
on Arcana, remember, were full statues that had bodies and feet, but just their heads severed. This is kind of the opposite. It's just heads on skinny pillars. It's kind of creepy, like they're giant pest dispensers, but it looks so cool. Remember, the statues inside the ruins on Arcana were not screaming like this. They looked at peace.
No.
So I just kind of like the idea that it's the witches who stayed who cry, and it's the witches who left who listen. They approach this towering structure built into the side of the cliff that looks a lot like a dour Minas Tirith from Return of the King, atop
Yeah.
The statue is
Okay,
a more
yeah.
pristine version of the Cetos ruins, the slabs uncorrupted by the elements. And Morgan finds here 3 Night Sisters, the Great Mothers. According to the episode credits, their names are Lachesis, played by Jane Edwina Seymour, who played the Borg Queen in Star Trek Picard. She's on the right with the
Nice.
rounded headdress. Clotho, played by Claudia Black from Stargate SG-1 and played Chloe Fraser from the Uncharted games. She's in the
Nice.
center with a single pointed headdress who does most of the talking. And then Actropa, played by Gerald Prescott Gallion, known for playing Madame Xanadu on the Swamp Thing show. She's on the left with the 2 pointed headdress. So these names are a fascinating choice because Lachesis, Clotho, and Atropos are the names of the 3 fates of Greek mythology that we've referenced before. Those fates were also known as the Moirai, which is where Dave Filoni got the name of Ahsoka's bird companion that represents a daughter of Mortis. Now, these witches, of course,
Stealing
were similar
everything from
headdresses than
Greek
Mother
mythology.
Talzin wore, and that appearance was based off of original designs for the Sith created for the Phantom Menace and then repurposed for Clone Wars. But the fact that these 3 headdresses that we see here are all slightly different could be telling us something, because in Greek mythology, Clotho is the youngest and she spins the thread of human life. Lachesis is the middle, who measures the thread, and then Atropos is the oldest, who cuts that thread and decides when people die. So this Clotho, with a K, has the headdress with 1 point, like the pointed needle that spins the thread. Lachesis has a
Wow.
rounded headdress, but Actropa, who would cut the thread of life, has a 2-pointed headdress.
Wow,
like
yeah.
scissors! But of course, these were the 3 witches that Sabine referred to when she figured out how to unlock the sphere in episode 1. But since those ruins were thousands of years old, I'm wondering if there must always be 3 caretaker witches on Peridia. It's kind of like something that gets passed on generation after generation. But yes, these were the voices that Morgan Elsbeth heard calling to her on Cetos. Episode 2 was titled Toil and Trouble, which was an allusion to the 3 witches of Macbeth. Double, double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Like the fates of Greek mythology, they tell the future. They tell the future in Macbeth, but it's always cryptic. Anytime a political leader tries to use this magic, it always blows up in their face. Clotho says,
Welcome, child of Dathomir. You do our ancestors credit.
she speaks with additional voices layered on top of her own, kind of like Mother Talzin often did. It's like when one of them talks, all 3 of them are talking. They speak for all the witches of Dathomir throughout time. Atropos says,
It reeks of Jedi.
and Lachesis confirms,
It is dangerous.
and this angle is especially creepy because it's from Sabine's point of view as Jane Edwina Seymour looks directly into the lens of the camera. But they refer to Sabine as it, disrespecting Jedi as animals, like false practitioners of the Force. Because yeah, it sounds like they predate the Jedi Order, but it also indicates that Sabine does have some connection to the Force, or at least a connection to Ahsoka. But my question is, do they smell this Jedi doo-doo on Balin? Because later they seem surprised when Balin is revealed as a former Jedi by Thrawn. So Balin just must be really good at blocking away that light side of the Force. Like the 3 witches in the Arcana ruins, they hover the spheres over their own palms and yeesh those fingernails. It's just an interesting point to compare to Sabine, because we saw Sabine's fingernails in episode 2, that her fingernail polish was chipped. And I like how the red beams that form between these spheres kind of work like rope that ties
Yeah.
someone up. It's a kind of mystical thread being the weapon of these 3 witches that are based on the fates.
Yeah,
that are
okay.
controlling the threads of fate. 3 creatures howl at the Peridia Tower. Dave Filoni's wolf obsession coming back, but rather than wolves or loath wolves or anything, these are the howlers that we see later, which share their name with reptilian creatures from Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, but these seem to be more canine and horse-like. The VFX on these things are actually pretty good. You kind of forget that
They're
they're not
furry.
actually there. Balin's dialogue in this episode is fascinating.
This is a land of dreams and madness.
This is the most curious part to me.
He describes Peridia as a kind of archetypal forest, kind of like in A Midsummer Night's Dream where magic can happen. But remember, he called this place a graveyard. So it's a
Yeah,
place where
he sure
magic
did.
once lived, but when it was abandoned, the magic started to fade away. Kind of like the ruins of Valyria in A Song of Ice and Fire. The doom of Valyria led to the gradual death of the dragons and magic leaving this world altogether. But Shin Hati says that she didn't grow up with these stories, but Balin says,
Stories of this galaxy are considered folk tales, some ancient past, long forgotten.
With good reason. Sometimes stories are just stories.
yeah, it's kind of a bit of commentary on how sacred we should hold these Star Wars stories. I love stories about stories, but with Shin's response, it kind of feels like to the younger Star Wars fan, what was sacred to the older generation might not be as sacred to them. Balin says that he watched a Jedi temple burn.
Yeah.
It didn't
Interesting.
make sense of it at the time, but
As you get older, look at history, you realize it's all inevitable. Fall of the Jedi, rise of the Empire. It repeats again and again and again.
now George Lucas would describe this as, oh, it's like poetry, it rhymes. But for Balin, someone living inside of this story, he's just sick of the cycle. So when Shin asks him if Thrawn will give them power, Balin says,
That sort of power is fleeting. What I seek is the beginning, so I may finally bring this.
I want to know what this
So Balin is on
is.
a fascinating quest, kind of like what Daenerys Targaryen spoke of in season 5, wanting to break the wheel before she just kind of forgot about all that in season 7 and 8. He wants a deeper power on Peridea beyond Thrawn.
And that beginning is here.
If the old stories are true.
I have some thoughts on what this could be later. So in her dungeon, Sabine whispers,
Ahsoka.
Now in episode 5, when Ahsoka was pulled out of that water, she said Anakin, but we heard a female voice whisper from the cosmos. That female voice might have been Sabine in this moment.
Oh,
Sabine tries to use
yeah.
the Force to escape the dungeon, and for a second it seems like it's working.
No.
But it wasn't.
It
Wasn't.
It's actually from the Chimera, the Star Destroyer of Grand Admiral Thrawn that we saw in Rebels. The Great Mothers and Morgan watch it arrive, and I love how Clotho seems to be holding a rope or some prayer beads, as she would be the fate who initially spins that thread of life. But the Chimera is framed perfectly so that it looks like it's rising from that tower, kept alive by Night Sister sorcery. You can see one of its top spherical shield generators, and several plates all over its hull are augmented with gold parts, like the material the Eye of Sion and Morgan's dropship are made out of. These golden additions may be repairs after the Purrgil wrap their tentacles around this ship, or to make it so that the Chimera can easily attach to the Eye of Sion and get that hyperspace tow.
yeah.
You'll notice that its underbelly has the same painted pattern that it had in Rebels, and I just cannot get over the symmetry of the shot, perfectly bisected by the fold of the hull and the corner of the tower. It looks so good. It's worth
Yeah, that
remembering
was
since the Chimera got
great.
zipped off to hyperspace by the Purrgil in the Rebels finale, it still has on board, presumably, the pieces of the Lothal Jedi temple that Palpatine tried to use to corrupt Ezra. Thrawn's forces are revealed.
Yeah.
I think this is my favorite needle drop Kevin Kiner has ever composed thus far. The organ plus the electric distortion just hits so hard. It's such an uncommon sound in Star Wars, and it's done to shock us with this unlikely return of a face that you do not normally see in Star Wars. Thrawn's stormtroopers chant his name. They still worship this guy despite their dwindling numbers and their broken armor. Yeah, their armor looks awesome. It's been 9 years since their exile in the Rebels finale. Their armor's dirty. It's got mismatched parts, probably taken from some of the dwindling numbers.
Yeah, it's all
pieces on the people who are still
Interesting.
surviving. It is all cracked. It's held
Yeah.
together with red cloth, which shows how their wounds have been nursed by these witches of the red cloth, and their imperial conformity has been fused with a uniquely Dathomirian aesthetic. We actually saw some red cloth wrapped around Maul's temple behind that bonfire in Dathomir in the Rebels Season 3 episode Visions and Voices. Now, the captain of these stormtroopers is Enoch, played by Wes Chatham from The Expanse. His stormtrooper mask has been fully broken and pieced back together almost in the style of Japanese kintsugi art, but with a golden face mask, kind of like Tigress of Gaul and Gladiator, a bit like the golden mask of General Clytus from Flash Gordon, which was a huge influence on George Lucas in the early Star Wars films. So it just shows how Enoch is part of a post-imperial cult of Thrawn. Thrawn being someone who always loved art and history. Actually, the name Enoch comes from the Bible, who was a human who became the immediate attendant to the throne of God, a human who actually got to enter heaven as a human. This reflects Enoch being at the side of this godly figure of Thrawn. Now, Lars Mikkelsen voiced Thrawn in Rebels and plays him here, and images of this guy from trailers just do not do him justice, because really it is his voice that makes the character so good. He enters with one of the sickest opening lines in live action of any Star Wars character ever.
What was first just a dream has become a frightening reality for those who may oppose us.
Holy shit. Remember, Balin described Peridea as a land of dreams and madness. It's almost like Thrawn might have heard him with that, because his response here is, what was first a dream has become a frightening reality. Sorcerers deal in dreams, military strategists deal in reality. So a reminder, Thrawn is a chiss with blue skin, red eyes, and I love how they kept the V-shaped indentation on his forehead.
I didn't even notice that.
Thrawn's origins from Timothy Zahn's 1991 novel Heir to the Empire, Dave Filoni bringing Thrawn back into canon as the villain of Rebels Season 3 and 4. Watch our Rebels recap series for more info on this guy. I also did a whole Thrawn timeline video back in April. But just seeing him here carrying himself with pomp and majesty, it is exactly true to form for Thrawn. But that said, notice how they allowed Lars Mikkelsen to keep his normal aged appearance and his build. If you look closely at his white uniform, it has been wrinkled and frayed in some parts, especially on the collar. Despite Thrawn's best efforts, he cannot hide the toll 9 years has taken on him. Thrawn is now the Napoleon Bonaparte of Star Wars. Napoleon being one of history's greatest military strategists who took over France as a dictator and a god king, then exiled to Elba, and then made a grand return to power before his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. Thrawn is about to depart part his Elba. Thrawn says Enoch will
Okay.
begin the cargo transfer as per Thrawn's agreement with the Great Mothers. Morgan says,
I have seen the catacombs. It will take some time.
so what is this cargo? They actually
Yeah.
went into that in an amazing episode of WikiLeaks that came out last night. Go check it out. But actually later we see Thrawn's men moving these casket-shaped containers from the tower to the Chimera.
Yeah, what
I
is
think
it?
These are corpses of past Night Sisters and Night Brothers on Peridia that the
Oh.
Great Mothers want to
What?
resurrect in this other galaxy. Kind of like what we saw Talzin doing with zombified corpses in Clone Wars. It's not just this small army of stormtroopers that Thrawn plans to return with. He's going to come back with a true army of the dead. Actually, later on, we see
Damn.
one of these caskets floating past the camera. It shakes with an unnatural rattle.
Mothers, you wish to speak with me.
And as Thrawn tells Morgan,
Death and
Crazy.
resurrection are common deceptions played out by both Night Sister and Jedi.
a clue that these Night Sisters plot to resurrect their dead. Actually, Marok may have been their first experiment at doing just that. So back in this scene, Thrawn recognizes Balin.
Then you must be General Balin Skull of the Jedi Order.
He calls him General. Thrawn knows that Balin had a military rank as a fighter in the Clone Wars. This shows his expertise. He knows all the names, kind of like
Wow.
Batman knows all the names of the detectives and the cops and the GCPD.
How does he
so
know?
then Thrawn meets Sabine, recalling her as one of those rebels he chased down in Rebels Season 3 and 4. Thrawn is shocked that Sabine's obsession with finding Ezra was worth so much to her.
How that singular focus will reshape our galaxy.
Yeah.
You've gambled the fate of your galaxy on that belief.
You could see in his eyes, though, some uncertainty over this loose thread, kind of like a chess master trying to outsmart someone who is just kind of winging it. That's one of the most frustrating people for chess masters to play. Sabine gets a howler and blasters and Ezra's lightsaber back, and Enoch says,
I will.
"Ooh, cold." It is the kind of thing a stormtrooper on this graveyard planet for 9 years just trying to make the most of his death would say. Sabine
Right.
uses the same kind of scam
Die
that Han used
well.
for Luke on Hoth and Empire. Hera actually used a bulkier version of it last episode on Cetos. But
Right.
Sabine gets attacked by marauders. But whereas before she's been a better shot with her blasters and not as good with the lightsaber, now it's the opposite. She has to resort to the lightsaber, and with the lightsaber, she successfully finishes them off. Now, as Balin and Shin ride out from the castle, it does have some runes written along the top. This is not the alphabet we figured out for our end credit star map video. It's a different language. It kind of looks like the Sith language of Ur-Khatat, but it's not that either because this would predate that. These kind of look like the runes that were on the inside of the chalice that Maul had Ezra drink from on Dathomir when he used the Night Sister magic to combine their minds. Meanwhile, Thrawn and Morgan observe this galaxy star map, which I'm going to assume is not the galaxy Peridia is in, but the main galaxy star map as it's all charted out, whereas I don't think the Peridia galaxy would be as charted. So it looks like Thrawn is making plans for where to strike when he returns. We get some lighthearted hijinks this episode of Sabine shaming the Howler. And then
That
we meet the
was
Nosy,
fun.
which are nomadic creatures akin to turtles or crabs that disguise themselves as rocks. Yeah, they're a lot like the Ewoks, but there's
That's
more
what I thought.
pragmatism. They seem a bit further along. Like they wear multi-layered clothes with fasteners made out of teeth. My wife pointed this out, but those might not be shells that are part of their anatomy, but rather shell backpacks that they wear. Because think about it, how else would they get these slim-fitting clothes on their bodies? But
Right.
this Nosy
Yeah.
recognizes the rebel insignia on Sabine's pauldron because he has a similar patch, proving that they know Ezra Bridger. It makes sense that Ezra would get along with these guys, as throughout Rebels, he'd love to disguise himself in different uniforms and using silly pseudonyms. Like at some points, he calls himself Jabba the Hutt and Lando Calrissian. Balin finds a severed staff to know Sabine's lightsaber severed this, and Balin tells Shin about Ezra Bridger.
Comes from a breed of Boken Jedi trained in the wild after
Boken.
the temple fell.
Boken refers to the wooden training swords that we saw Ahsoka and Sabine using in episode 3. So this just kind of refers to a homeschool Jedi. But Balin tells Shin that she's not a Jedi.
He was trained as a Jedi. I trained to be something more.
Now, Balin says that he misses the idea of the Jedi Order, but not the true weakness of the Jedi Order. And he sees the future here on this planet in what was once the great witch kingdom of the Dathomiri. And he says while the Great Mothers are fleeing, Balin sees an opportunity.
Perhaps they feel
Right.
a power greater than their own. Something calls to me.
What is, how can he harness something greater?
Can't you see it?
So, what is this greater power in this Peridian wasteland beyond
Right.
Thrawn that the Great Mothers are fleeing, but Balin is drawn to? Maybe the Mortis gods, which might explain Balin's reluctance to kill Ahsoka because Ahsoka has the spirit of the daughter inside of her. Maybe Balin is drawn to the purest form of the Force religion through the Father before it was bastardized by the corruptible Jedi Order. But maybe this great power is Bendu, the Force being in Rebels Season 3 that eluded Thrawn and predicted Thrawn's defeat at the arms of the Purgle. Remember, Bendu was kind of an agnostic. He reached out to both Kanan and Ezra and Maul, and in the Rebel Season 3 finale, he equally destroyed Imperial forces and the Rebel fleet. He's kind of on neither side, and it would be really fun for Thrawn to see
gigantic
again. But I'm going to throw another
moose
theory at you. That
I know he
that
looks like a
Balin
moose.
recognizes could be the priestesses from the Wellspring of Life. What if the Night Sisters branched out from those priestesses, and the priestesses cast them out of the Wellspring, like Lucifer from heaven, and then banished them to this hell of Peridia? The reason why the Dathomiri might have migrated to our galaxy could have been some gradual attempt to get closer and closer back into that Garden of Eden. I gotta dig into this in another video because it's really heady and there's a lot of moving parts. But Sabine follows the Noti to their lakeside village with rounded
That's so
trailers
cool.
that kind of looks like the shells that they wear. It looks like the females of this group wear shawls over their heads. There's just a lot of good world building with these things. And then our man Ezra Bridger returns.
I knew I could count on you.
He appears out of focus over Sabine's left shoulder, just as Anakin appeared to Ahsoka in The World Between Worlds. Iman Esfandi plays Ezra Bridger 9 years older, and he has a beard, and he looks just like his father Ephraim Bridger. Even with the hand on the hip, he has animated Ezra's crystal blue eyes and that wrist tech that Ezra wore on his left arm throughout the Rebel series. Sabine and Ezra pick up right where they left off with some playful banter that they always had.
Typical. Always a plan.
He's wearing chainmail.
Hey. It worked, didn't it? Didn't it?
And I love that sudden seriousness from Ezra. Like, think about it, for 9 years, Ezra would not have known if Lothal was saved or if the rebels ever had a chance of defeating the Empire. He just kind of had to make peace with being completely out of the fight and being completely in the blind. But Ezra asks how Sabine found him, like how she got there, and she ducks this difficult conversation the same way Ahsoka sidestepped Hu Yang's difficult questions in the opening scene. Once Ezra finds out what Sabine sacrificed to get here, I don't think he's gonna be very happy. But the Great Mother another Jedi approaches, and he susses out who it is.
Could it be the recently deceased Ahsoka Tano?
He tells Morgan that death and resurrection are common deceptions played out by both Night Sister and Jedi, and since Balin was a former Jedi, his words should be treated as flawed. Thrawn says,
I want to know her background, history, home world, her master, everything.
Yes, this is always a huge part of Thrawn's strategic approach, to learn everything about his enemy, their history, their art, and weaponize it. And it's interesting that he doesn't know that Ahsoka's master was Anakin Skywalker, something that Balin Skoll knew, but he was part of the Jedi Order during the Clone Wars. Thrawn wasn't. He was a military figure. But there is evidence from various books that Thrawn was one of the few people who deduced that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader were the same person. So as soon as he finds out that Anakin Skywalker was a master, he's gonna know that Darth Vader was her master. Thrawn orders to destroy any approaching star whales with prejudice, and he turns back to the Great Mothers.
Great Mothers, I shall once again require the aid of your dark magic.
The thread of destiny demands it, Grand Admiral.
So the closed captioning spells this magic, M-A-G-I-C-K.
Right, I was
which gives it
gonna-
a more supernatural metaphysical quality. Like magic with a K
I
is
saw
what
that.
witches do. But he says once again. So what past instance did Thrawn use the Great Mother's magic other than to summon Morgan Elsbeth? Like in a way that he could use it again? Could it have been these mothers that drew Ahsoka into the World Between Worlds to wrestle with Ahsoka's demons, and that Ahsoka just successfully passed that test? Did they actually use the Lothal Jedi Temple that is still on the Chimera to do this? Look, make no mistake, folks, Thrawn's respect for this magic is transactional at best. And the real story here is the relationships that Ahsoka and Balin Skoll have to the fairy tales that they were told as kids. Are the stories true, or are they only fantasies that happen in a galaxy far, far away? Thank you so much for watching this breakdown. You can support our channel by grabbing an Ahsoka-inspired Fulcrum shirt available at nerdriot.shop. Please subscribe to the Break Room for all of our episodes of WikiLeaks, our Ahsoka After Show, and subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network. Thanks to Noah Chen for helping write and research this breakdown. You can follow me at EA Voss, follow New Rockstars. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Ooh, dang.
Did you learn a lot?
Filoni uses a lot of Greek mythology in his Star Wars makeup. It's like he's just basically positioned Greek mythological figures and just dropped them directly onto Dathomir. Or not Dathomir, Peridia. But I wanted maybe Eric to know what Balin is looking for. I want to know.
Maybe next week he'll tell you.
He had some guesses, but I want to know.
He doesn't want to give it to you. It's gonna be.
He doesn't know. That's why, because
it's not shown in this episode.
Exactly. Nothing is given away.
Yeah.
The mystery is intact. But man, I love drawing the correlations. I love how he draws our eye to the correlation between the way Ezra Bridger was revealed, the way Anakin was revealed, all of these connections that make it all feel like a piece.
Right.
I want to know more about the Noti, the most important race ever discovered.
They want you to research on your own.
But we'll never know until they show us.
We only got 2 shows left. That's basically
I
it.
know, 2 more episodes for all of this to resolve.
Yeah.
I think in the next episode, Thrawn makes the jump back.
Right.
And then we have to chase him down or something. I don't know.
Well,
we'll see.
Thank you again for turning into our movie channel, show channel, and liking our videos to get the algorithm going. Thank you for subscribing to our Small Mighty channel to help us grow. Thank you again, and see you in the next video.